Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for your patience. We start on time. We try to start on time. Anyway. Oh, Mr. Tim Peter, oh my God. Welcome to This Week in Hospitality Marketing Live, show number 248. Thank you, everyone that has joined us directly, and for everyone that is now piping in on our simulcast globally, around the world, 32 countries and counting. Mr. Mr. Tim Peter of Tim Peter Associates, the highly acclaimed, award-winning, elusively high-altitude quality product leader of the industry person. I'm just trying to schmooze you a little bit. I'm just trying to, you know.
Are you talking about Tim Peter?
What's going on with you?
Well, we've lost Robert. I was actually going to make some little hats with footprints on them saying former friend of Robert.
Are they cheetah prints?
We have lost. That's what you did there. We've only lost temporarily, so.
Hey, Melissa!
Look at you joining the show officially.
Officially joining the show with camera and data and all the cool stuff.
And the fancy microphone.
Robert, for keeping Stuart off the show and bringing you instead. Thank you.
Which, by the way, increased the average IQ of the show. And the
for those who may not know, this is Melissa. Melissa is with Fuel Travel. The smarter brains, the better quality person that really runs the show, pretty much everything. Right. Podcast, everything. The data source, the person that is the SEO vanguard, just pretty much the accolades going on.
Hello, everybody.
Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for joining us. It is an awesomeness. And you have some very cool data with you as well. Are we actually going to wait for Stuart to join you, or did he just send you as his vanguard?
I think he's joining, question mark.
Well, we don't need to wait for him since we know that you know the data better than he does anyway. He likes showing it off as if he knows it, but we know that you really know it better than he knows it. So it all kind of works out well.
Should we explain to our audience the format of today's show, as this is the first show since the outbreak that we don't have a specific host.
That's true. We don't have it, although Melissa would qualify
had
it been under alternate circumstances. But the privilege of having her here is cool enough. We will be nice. Oh, well, okay.
Wow.
Sorry.
And there, the IQ goes. Right back down.
There goes the bell curve.
I figured you need more Fueligans on here. One was not enough.
No, one was not enough. But we had the best one on. I mean, good to see you, Stuart.
This is true. Here's the thing that you guys don't realize, right? I pretend I'm really smart. It's really Melissa that gives me all the information.
No, we knew that all along.
No.
You're not telling us that.
This is how we know you weren't listening before, because it's actually how we were introing Melissa.
Okay, good. Yeah.
We actually refer to it as the
brains
of the operation.
I don't know. Yeah, she's the brains and the looks. I don't have either. So I don't even know what I do anymore. I don't know.
You rock that headset. You rock the headset. There's nobody that rocks a headset like you rock a headset.
I don't know. Robert's pretty close second. He usually rocks a headset.
That's true. He is the well. I was telling him that I was going to get little hats with little footprints on it, saying former friend of Robert. You know. But no, the dude must be insanely busy to not be able to join the show, because he has been a part of the show for all this time that we've had it for the year.
What he has done, Robert actually explained this the other day. I can't remember when this came up, but he has a client who the only time that actually works for them at the moment is 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Central. So he's, as we try to do, as we all try to do, being responsive to the needs of his client, and thus, he's going to be missing indefinitely.
Unlike Fuel and Flip 2, who are like, I'm sorry.
First rule of Fight Club is there is no Fight Club. Okay, so
Right.
First rule of the show is there's nothing else other than the show. Okay, Mr. Stewart, since you're so kind to bring Melissa on board, would you please preface our soon-to-be conversation that Melissa has come to go over and share with us?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. So we've been putting out a sentiment study. And so to give it some background, we have a database of leisure travelers in North America that we've acquired over the years. In a previous life, we used to own and manage a lot of city.com sites. We still own MyrtleBeach.com, but we used to own Charleston, Savannah, Hilton Head, Honolulu. I don't even remember. There was like 20 different ones. Daytona at one point, Boston. So there's a ton. So we've got this big consumer database of people. It does heavily skew to the kind of East Coast feeder markets for sure. So there's a little bias in there, but it's so large that I think some of that bias gets wiped out. So basically, we've been sending out a bunch of questions every 2 weeks. This is the third time we've done it. So we've got a full month of sentiment shifts now. And we're asking questions about their travel plans primarily. But the sample size is, in all three cases, we've had over 10,000 people respond to questions. The last one, I think, had 7,600 completes surveys. So it's very substantial. I think it's the biggest sentiment study I've seen out there. A lot of the other ones that folks are doing are in the kind of 1,000 to 2,000 range. Sure. So in terms of scale, I think ours is pretty good. So it really eliminates a lot of the potential bias and concerns that the smaller sample size would have. So with that said, Melissa has been feverishly working for the last several days, compiling notes, comparing the last 3 sets of data, and just looking at any trends we can see, any glimmers of hope that there might be, and there are definitely some, but also looking at what are some interesting narratives coming out of that. She put out a phenomenal blog post on our website yesterday that's in the notes in the links that Robert sent out. And she's also recording a video, so anyone subscribed to the HSMAI emails would have today received a video of Melissa talking about the data as well. So rather than me pretending I know what's going on, I figured we'll just let Melissa come in because she's so deeply rooted in the data and talk about what we're seeing, and that hope is on the horizon is what we call this one. So there's a few little things that give us a lot of hope. So, and for those of you who don't know who Melissa is, she's a fellow Fueligan. She's the director of analytics here at Fuel, and she's been with us over 10 years. We tend to keep our Fueligans for a long time, so there's a lot of decade long. Well, so almost 15 years, so that's over 10. And I've known her a long time. She's one of the smartest people I know, and very good at telling you you're wrong without insulting you as well. So she's very, very good. She's my conscience. When I get out of whack, she'll grab me back to the right direction. So she's great. So I'll hand it over to Melissa and let her kind of dig into some of the things that we've seen in the data. And did someone drop it in the chat yet? Is the link in there so people can see?
I feel bad for interrupting, but the guy, I don't know who that is, but I was just going to say, he just said something I was going to say, where he loves the fact that you call the folks who work with you Fueligans. I call the folks who work for my company Peters, and we need to call that word.
That's funny.
Very suiting for us.
Yeah, Fueligans is really cool. For those of you who don't know Fuel, we've kind of, we've been around since the early 90s, but we've kind of been under the radar. We weren't always hospitality focused. We've always been the scrappy bunch of folks that go around and just solve people's problems. So we've dealt with a lot of verticals, a lot of e-commerce clients, a lot of real estate, healthcare, various things. But then in 2015, we went through some ownership changes and said, you know what makes sense for us right now is just to go all in hospitality. So that's when we rebranded Fuel Travel and applied all our knowledge and learning from these other industries to hospitality. And even though we'd been in hospitality since '93, we've really been solely focused on it for the last 5 years. But, at the DNA of our employees and why we call them Fueligans is we really spend a lot of time looking for the right fit. And the person that works well at Fuel is someone that's really scrappy. When someone comes to them with a problem that they don't know how to solve, rather than freaking out, they get excited and say, I don't know how to do that, but I'm going to find out. We have a very can-do, win-anyway attitude, and we do it with a smile on our face and a little bit of swagger, but without being arrogant. We consider ourselves kind of confidence without the arrogance. So there's a DNA to a Fueligan, and I think the word and the implication of Fueligan really sums it up nicely. So
don't forget your world award-winning podcast.
Yeah,
pretty much make sure it stays on track. Where you guys try to run it off the rails.
Yeah, you'll get a feel for what a Fueligan is if you listen to that show, because you see us, warts and all. We're very open and transparent about who we are on the Fuel podcast. So if you want to learn more about what it means to be a Fueligan and become an honorary Fueligan by listening to the podcast, you can definitely do that. But yeah, we don't even know the origin of the word Fueligan. Someone said it one day, and this is probably, 10 years ago at least. Yeah, it may be. I don't know. But it just all of a sudden cropped up in our nomenclature and it's stuck, and we're not really sure the origin, but it seems like it's apt and it's been around a long time. So.
Anywho.
Yep. Anywho.
So short story long.
Stuart's not proud of his team at all. I think there's a total disrespect going on, but that's just.
It's family, man. It's a big loving family. We know way too much about each other, but it's all good. That's why Melissa really stays so long. It's because I got so much dirt on her. She could never go work anywhere else.
I think that might be reversed, but okay. I bet bonus time is a really good discussion for you, Melissa. So, Stuart.
That's what I keep on saying.
Yeah.
So about that survey then.
Yeah, let's jump into the data. You want to talk about that?
About the data. So as Stuart said, this is the third version of this survey that we've done. And I'm going to say that on this version, we did break the data down by some demographic information. So we broke it down by age, looking at millennials versus Gen X versus baby boomers. We also looked at income levels, and we also looked at some specific hotspot areas. So I'm very grateful that we had this data because, brutally honest, there's not a whole lot that changed in the data from the last 2 weeks that it went out. So without some other talking points, I would just have a blog of pie charts and graphs. So I'm glad I had something else to talk about on this one. So the good news is that looking at people who said that they are absolutely not willing to travel, like nothing could convince them to travel, has been on a downward trend since that first survey went out. On our first respondent survey, we had 40% saying that nothing could convince them to travel. That went down to 29% on our second round, and we're down to 27% on this round. So I think that is incredibly encouraging.
I wonder what portion of that audience that would have been the answer regardless of situation.
Right, like what's the floor? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, like is it 3%? Like literally no matter what was going on, there was nothing you could do to make them travel this year because it's maybe related to their situation.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
Your data prior to this would not have included that, right?
No, because they always assumed that they were going to get everyone to travel.
Yeah, we've never asked that question before this situation.
Probably, I mean, obviously, hindsight 2020, probably a good one to continue to ask once people are starting to travel, see how that changes over time. Does that number, do we reach a floor at some point below which people are like, nope, I'm not going to do it?
Yeah, like it's like the unemployment number. Below a certain number, they consider everyone employed.
Right, exactly.
Below a certain number, everyone who wants to travel is traveling.
Right. That's a great point.
Sorry, didn't mean to derail you. I just thought that was a potentially interesting thing to track moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Valid point. Some other interesting little tidbits. Looking at what people are going to spend on their vacations coming up. We've been holding steady at about 32% saying that they will spend less on their next vacation. Not surprising, obviously people in different income brackets are going to skew more towards that. But what I thought was more interesting was looking at that by age. So we had a much higher percentage of millennials that would say that they would spend less. We had 36% of millennials versus only 28% of baby boomers. So age does matter when it comes to spending habits. At least at this time, and I'm sure that's overall, but particularly during a crisis when unemployment, as you said, is kind of through the roof. So
jump in on that for one quick second. I mean, this is something I've been tracking for a while because of work I do outside the travel industry, actually. One of the things I talk about a lot is that they're not millennials, they're adults under 40. And they are the largest share of business travelers, they're the largest share of the workforce, they are the largest demographic group currently. And unfortunately, for the second time in their adult lives, they're getting kicked in the teeth financially. So this may be something that's more systemic over time that we see, that millennials, as they age into the marketplace in larger numbers, because the youngest are still just out of college and the like. But you have to recognize these are all adults at this point. But their discretionary spend is going to be low relative to what we've seen in prior generations, and that looks, now that this is the second thing that has hit them in the 10 years that they've been that they've been adults, that may be a systemic problem for their entire life cycle. Like that they may just be poorer relative to prior generations, and possibly compared with Gen Z at some point, because they have not had the opportunities to build wealth, to build disposable income in the way that prior generations had, and in the way that future generations may.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder too if they're gonna develop habits that are different, because they're going to be more cautious about spending.
Right.
And Melissa, you told the story on the podcast about your grandmother who went through the Great Depression.
Yes, and when I went to her house, and by the way, she lived next door to me, there was always a drawer full of sugar packets and jelly packets, like always taken from restaurants.
Right. My father is a child of the Depression. I am the youngest child of someone who didn't have kids until he was older, and I'm old enough that my dad grew up in his childhood, but I mean he grew up during the Depression, and his approach to money, his approach to risk, his approach to things like that was undoubtedly shaped by that. And my sense is that adults under 40, millennials, are going to be in a similar boat. I don't know that it's going to be one for one, but it's going to be again, they had 2008, 2009 when the oldest of them were coming out of college, or were just out of college, just starting their work careers, and now this, this may shape their buying habits and their ability to buy. There was a great piece of research from the St. Louis Fed a year ago, 2 years ago, that showed that the wealth building to date of the millennial generation as a rule, and it is considerably lower than what had preceded them.
I think these kids are just always going to have loads of toilet paper forever.
and sugar packets.
Well, okay, you made an interesting point. Get hit in the teeth out of college, and now they get hit in the teeth just when they're going to have a family.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you not think that the behavior could go either way? You either have adults, the under 40s, who are now really cautious and really careful and don't really want to spend anything, or you have the bleeding upwards of this YOLO mentality. Like, I'm going to spend big because I never know when the next epidemic is going to be.
It's not that they may be unwilling to spend. I'm talking about, certainly attitudes play a role, but the other thing that plays a role is they literally just have less money than Gen X did when they were 35, 38, 32, 30, than boomers did. There's a very real, if you think about where you start earning money in your career, think about where you start having disposable income in your career, and where you start to build wealth. You have a 401k, you have a savings account, you put a down payment on a house, so you're building up home equity and things along those lines. Their ability to have participated in those sorts of events hasn't existed as much, just because they haven't had the same period of prime earning. I shouldn't say prime earning years, because those tend to be 40s, but they haven't had the same period of early earning years. And if you think about compounding interest and things along those lines, it has hurt their ability to step up the ladder at the same rates as Gen X did, as boomers did, and the like. And it's entirely possible that Gen Z won't have that problem, as they start to come out of college 3, 4, 5 years from now, right? So they may enter into a booming economy and be in a better position.
But I wonder how interesting it will be, the impact that the COVID-19 is going to have upon. You mentioned there they come out of college, so it's first job opportunity, and now we're talking at the stage where people are looking to start a family. Well, there's one thing that we know that a family does, and that is it sucks all of your resources, your finance. It's expensive. It is not cheap having a family.
Oh God.
I'm 21 with 2 kids. You can tell.
Plus tax, buddy.
Plus tax. Yeah, 21 plus tax. Yeah. So I wonder then if that's going to delay decisions around family. At what point am I going to have a family? If I was going to start now, oh no, I'm not going to. Then I would, the knock-on impact upon that is, can we afford a little bit extra to actually go on vacation next year, as opposed to, because the family might be 2 or 3 years down the line, because it is that big a commitment and that big a financial commitment.
And don't forget, the millennials already have delayed the age range of having a family. And what's actually potentially happening here is there may just end up being a larger amount of this generation that forgoes the traditional family because they had already delayed it. Right, exactly. They'd already delayed it, and then they just got kicked in the teeth again around the time that they likely would have started reconsidering that, and they may age out.
The unboomers.
You talk about this, I wouldn't be surprised if people stop making new people altogether.
Or they do the whole Khalil thing. I have a kid, but I'm not there around. I just put a little videogram up saying, "Hey."
I think it's probably going to be more that they're going to carry on trying to make the little people, but just stop at the very final act. Actually bringing them to fruition.
It's okay, guys. I'm here to bring us all back.
I was going to say,
I was sitting going, what the hell?
Perfect timing.
It really was.
One stat.
did point out, we may see a baby boom where you have a whole bunch of people sitting at home and very bored. That's certainly possible.
It happens in the Northeast.
Again,
9 months after every major nor'easter. So
yeah, exactly. But again, a lot of this is just more about what their economic purchasing power is going to be, and when that will get back to normal.
Now, the good thing for our industry is they may not feel the full effect of that because the millennial does favor and prefer to spend their money on experiences over tangible items, which has benefited our industry and may shield us from feeling the full effect of their lesser earning potential that they've had through their life because they spend such an overweight amount versus other generations on travel and experiences.
And we see that in the data too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Stuart.
The data that Melissa's kind of going through, there's some questions later on that we broke down by age, and millennials are definitely the ones that are more willing to travel quicker than any other generation too. So that, I think that plays. Mm-hmm.
Right. I guess the thing that I would point out in that case is, and I agree with everything you just said, I also think it's true that they may be more willing to travel, they may travel more, but their average spend is probably going to be lower just because of the realities of what they can spend, right?
Yeah.
Right. We should you make a great point. We should let Melissa continue to go through the data.
Nah.
Hey, Valyn.
Hey, Valyn.
We're on the money train. I'll throw another money stat at you that I was a little bit surprised at. So we asked how people would spend their stimulus check. And not surprisingly, like the majority of people are either paying bills, some are putting into spending. But what I was surprised to see looking at it by income bracket, so we had 3 income brackets, less than $50,000 a year, 50 to 100, and then over 100,000. There was no significant difference whatsoever on those willing to spend that stimulus check on vacations. They were all under 10%, even the $100,000 and over. And that I was surprised at.
Yeah.
I think some of this, though, I mean, just to be fair, only one of the options you put in front of them would be considered fiscally irresponsible. And I'm wondering,
discretionary, yeah.
I'm wondering if you put like buy a new cell phone in there, how much that would suck out of the put it into savings, pay bills, purchase essentials, pay off credit card debt. Like it's like responsible. The only thing that wouldn't be considered responsible was take a vacation. That's the only option you gave them. I wonder if you change this up to give them one responsible answer and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 realistic answers, how different your answers would be, because your actual positioning of this is almost reminding them that they should be making fiscally responsible decisions with this money, or take a vacation.
So we said buy a car.
Yeah, buy a car, down payment for a house.
Increase the liquor cabinet size and capacity.
Right.
We can add that next time.
Right.
We did have there's an other and a write-in option that I want to say it was a significant percentage of folks put in. Most of the write-ins were folks that said they didn't qualify, or they were Canadian and stuff like that initially, which is why we added that as a second option as well.
All right, this one is, to me, the most shocking question in terms of results. So we asked, during the outbreak, I would like to hear from hotels on the following topics. Check all that applies. We had what the property is doing to protect guests, packages and specials, what the property is doing to protect staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all the way down to I don't want to receive anything from hotels. The number of people who don't want to hear from hotels has been consistently low. It's only been 25% in all 3 rounds. But today, the number one choice was to hear what the property is doing to protect guests. And I'm throwing this out there after last week's, you guys had a very long discussion about messaging, and we need to get over sort of highlighting what properties are doing on, to highlight all the cleaning and all the things. But then here this is as the number one thing that people want to hear from. What do you think about that? There were almost 60% of people that said that.
I assume that is as people go from the theoretical, boy, I sure would like to travel, to the practical of, hey, maybe I could travel, that's what that's about, and that number will decline over time as confidence comes back, trust comes back. That's my...
Actually, I think it'll hold steady for a bit as each group moves into that phase.
Right. I would agree.
As each group moves into, hey, I'm ready to travel, the first thing I want to know is, how am I not going to get sick?
Yeah.
So I think it'll hold. I wouldn't be surprised to see this number hold or even increase potentially over the next few months as the majority of audiences move through their first trip.
Yeah.
And then I bet you they never want to hear about it again.
Melissa, when did you collect this data?
This is from April 30th.
April 30th. Okay.
Yeah, but this was the first time that jumped above deals and specials, which I agree with Tim. I think that's a positive indicator that people's mindset is shifting away from hell no to, okay, maybe this is for me, So I think there's a lot of things like that in this, that if you interpret them a certain way, I think that they're all pointing towards folks moving to the next phase psychologically in planning a vacation.
And also, the media has covered a lot of people vacationing, right? So as states open up, there's been tons of beach shots, beaches full of people. And so I would imagine that puts travel at the top of mind for a lot of people who just weren't prepared to think about it because it wasn't an option.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for the first time now, people are actually starting to, it is that mind shift that you're talking about, because the UK here, it's ever so slightly different because we're still all very much on lockdown. But that there is talk that the Prime Minister is going to announce on Sunday that there's going to be some easing of the restrictions that are placed upon the entire country. Exactly what those restrictions or how they're going to be eased, we don't yet know. But there's wild speculation about it, and you can see the change in social media. Like the way people are talking, the things that people are talking about. What are you going to do when you can actually go and visit somebody? What happens if it is you can only visit a certain number of people, because at the moment it's your immediate family. You can only visit a certain number of people. The dilemma you're going to have there is, who are you going to visit? How are you
going to look after my kids for a day?
Yeah, who's going to look after the kids today so I can go to the beach? Yeah, that's the...
And if I want to be in your bubble, do you want to be in mine?
Yeah, exactly.
Does Tinder change to a dating app to a bubble app?
This is not bad. Lily.
Lily,
So,
it's the Brits again. I'm sorry, it's the Brits.
You need a gavel, Lily, just to bang something on the table.
yeah, I think I should put like a little bell or something. But no, so coming back to the topic at hand and Melissa's original question, I think that it could actually be sort of the reverse of what it seems to indicate, which is, hey, I'm scared of travel. And I think it was Stuart who made the point that they're moving into the kind of that practical phase of what should I do about travel. So before it was bombardment because they were like, I don't want to hear from hotels. I can't go to them anyway, and it's just making me angry that I can't go to them. Plus, every email says basically the same thing. Whereas now that we're outside of kind of the spam phase, people are like, okay, now I actually need actionable information about what I plan to do. So my guess would be that they only want to hear from hotels that they really want to visit, but there's no, good way for them to accomplish that. So they're in that sort of restless dreaming phase. I've been looking unsuccessfully for an article. So if anybody finds this, let me know. But I'm sure there's some sort of psychology journal out there that says, how long can the human mind tolerate having these types of restrictions placed on them before the restlessness overcomes the idea of safety. And I think that we're reaching that boiling point, which is why from everything that we're seeing, we think that as markets reopen, we're going to see major spikes in travel, probably exceeding last year's demand for about the first 30 days that a market is open. And then we're going to see that taper off to below normal levels and slowly come back up. So between those who say that we're going to have a quick recovery and a slow recovery, I think it's going to be actually a little bit of both.
Stuart, can I share what I've seen over the last couple of days?
You can. Mm-hmm. Just don't mention clients specifically, but yeah.
Of course. So we've been tracking all of our client revenue, obviously, over time since this has started. And the last 2 days consecutively, we've now seen more revenue than last year.
Mm-hmm. I can confirm that for their area and wider than just their customers. That's happening.
Yeah, this is outside
last week was about the first time I saw you guys hit like pretty close to year over year. This week, there have been a couple of days that have bled into exceeding year over year.
I'd be curious for Ed and Stuart because I'm seeing similar things, but it varies widely by market.
It does.
Yeah.
It definitely.
There are markets where we are definitely seeing that be true, and there are markets where demand is still very, very low.
I'll tell you, it's holding true in nature markets that don't have a strong reliance on airlift. So that's mountain, adventure, beach, lakefront.
I am seeing some cities, by the way, but they are markets. They're cities that again are not heavy air dependent. They're more rock dependent.
Hold on, I want to honor a question from Hot in the Netherlands. She has this to Melissa, who she probably considers the only authority on the show right now.
And who would blame her?
She's asking specifically, does that mean we should consider income as a filter for our marketing message?
I do think we need to sort of clarify, and maybe you guys did this at the beginning of the show, is the extent of regionalism in this data. So
this is primarily East Coast drive market.
U.S. East Coast drive market.
Yeah. Because I will say, I've started. By the way, full disclosure, I completely ripped off entire elements of the last version of this study and put them into a presentation where I used them as insights, which then got me invited to do almost the same presentation for a group in Canada, where now I'm applying the Canadian consumer mentality. And what's interesting is Canadian consumers are not as bullish as American. They are a good amount more pessimistic about the situation, which has been actually fun to kind of dig into. By the way, could not find a single consumer sentiment study near the scale of this one.
Right.
I've been looking. Actually, you can take the top 5 quoted ones and the total audience is less than this.
It's almost only half. It's only half. Yeah,
Wow.
it's only half of what you guys.
So
Well done, guys. Well done.
Nicely done.
yeah,
So
really.
Stuart, to go back to the question, because I think it's a really important question. Is how would you approach the income side of this? I certainly have my thoughts, but I'd love to hear other people's before I blather.
Oh no!
Yeah, I mean,
waiting.
yeah. So to disclose completely what we did, we actually had more breakdowns of income when we were looking at this. So we had, I think it was $25,000 increments. What we did for the results and just for the study to make it not take 10 years, we combined those. So we did the three brackets of under 50, 50 to 100, and above 100. There weren't that many differences. I would say there's definitely more from an age perspective. But Melissa can probably talk more specifically about what we did see differently from an income perspective. But in terms of how they're going to spend money, when they're going to travel, that didn't seem to affect. It wasn't affected by
Income.
the income as
That's
much
correct.
as it was.
Do you
age.
have any old studies where you asked similar questions that you could glean if that's actually an improvement in the lower income brackets?
Yeah, I'd have to look back. I don't know that we were breaking them down by income previously. I'd have to go and check.
Because that's something I've been dying to know is what is the impact of the unemployment being a benefit for under a certain income bracket? How is that shifting some of their temporary consumer behavior? But the problem is the questions. Some of these questions, if you don't have a baseline of how someone in that income bracket even closely answered, it makes it difficult to understand, is this a huge improvement for this income bracket, or is it a big drop-off?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I mean, the one question I would say that is kind of indicative of why I don't feel like there's a big difference is the one where we said, are you going to spend more, less, or the same, or you're undecided on your vacation this year? And that one, there wasn't a ton based on income. There wasn't a ton of difference. And some of that's psychological, right? Because I think folks, and I'm going to generalize, and Lily will tell me off for this, I'm sure, but what we've seen anecdotally is properties that are more based targeting lower income people. The people that show up are maxing out their credit card. They're fiscally not as responsible. And so they'll just spend every last penny they have on their vacation, whereas folks that have higher income, obviously have more means, but also a little more deliberate in their spending as well. So, I wonder if those two psychological approaches cancel each other out in this situation to where we get the kind of normalized data across the different income brackets. I don't know.
What I would say to that specifically is I worked for an economy brand during the downturn in 2001, 2002, and I worked for a luxury brand during the downturn of 2008, 2009. And this specific problem, and I want to be fair, there's a lot of people unemployed. The new unemployment numbers came out. They're terrible. It's truly bad. So anybody who's going to travel has to have the money to travel. But this lack of travel isn't driven by the economy. It's driven by a separate situation. Yeah. So, I think you have to be aware of what is our lower priced product for customers who that's appropriate to, what is our higher priced product for customers that's appropriate to. But I'm not surprised by the fact that people aren't going to spend a different amount when they travel than what they would have spent, at least conceptually. It seems to me that this is something where we have to assure trust. We have to be priced appropriately for those guests. We have to be affordable for guests where affordability is going to be an issue to some degree. But this one is less like 2001 or 2008, where it's really a case of people don't have money to spend. The people who don't have money to spend aren't going to travel because they don't have money to spend at all. The people who are willing to travel are going to spend what they're going to spend.
And that's the big question, though, right? Is really understanding the unemployment numbers and those impact on travel, because all travel is aspirational. No matter how little money you have, people always say they want to travel. I want to travel. I totally want to travel. Even if I don't have two nickels to rub together, I still dream of traveling. And I will say, of course I want to travel. So I'm having a hard time, not with this study, but just sort of generally understanding, and I think this is like my crystal ball is totally shattered at this point, but what that impact actually means and how to unwind aspiration from actual planning and with the money to actually go.
So
it's interesting because we've got this whole other standpoint. You guys are probably starting to learn how much I love psychology on this show. But we've got this mentality right now that we are all these 17-and-a-half-year-olds sitting at home saying, when I get to leave home, I'm going to make all my own decisions. And I think that regardless of whether people say what they're going to spend or not spend, I have a feeling people are going to get out there. And once they're in the moment, they're going to go a little crazy, probably more than they should, with their spending. And they're going to enjoy every single minute of putting themselves into debt and not regret it at all. But I do think that that's probably something that we're going to see. And from a revenue management standpoint, making sure if they're going to be throwing money around, that they're doing it on property in your restaurants and in your areas. I think it's something that needs to be a big part of the planning process.
By the way, I completely agree with that. I think there's a phrase that I've grown to like a lot, which I can't remember who coined it. I would credit them if I did. But people refer to the second wallet, right? Valyn will love this because it's this idea of first you got to get them to make the booking, and get that at whatever rate you're going to get it, et cetera. But then people do tend to bifurcate how they spend their money. There's the money I'm going to spend when I book the hotel, and then there's the money I'm going to spend when I'm in market. And that money I'm going to spend in market is the second wallet. And at the risk of sounding incredibly mercenary and incredibly insensitive, we want to grab every goddamn penny of that second wallet we can get our grubby little paws on.
Yes, we call that demand optimization. But.
Yeah. But the point there being that if they're willing to spend that extra money, you want to get that at that time. I want to go back to your point about the psychology of this for 1 second, Lily, and what we've seen in behaviors in the past, and what we're seeing at least with my clients who are getting some revenue right now, is we haven't seen people who are booking lower priced products. They're booking what they always would have bought. So behaviors haven't seemed to change. The volumes are lower, but the behaviors really are about the same. The thing that we saw in 2008, 2009 when I worked for a luxury product, and in 2001, 2002 when I worked for economy brands, were that people would trade down to some degree. So that, if I'm the $100,000 consumer and normally I might stay in a W, maybe I would stay in a Sheraton, or maybe I would stay in a Marriott, and go down a tier, because I still want to travel, but that's how they would manage their costs more, so that they allowed a little bit extra money from the second wallet. The people who would stay at the George StOnge, well, let's be fair. If they were staying at the George StOnge, they still had the money to stay at the George StOnge. Right. But the folks who were taking the once-in-a-lifetime trip for their honeymoon to, the George StOnge, maybe they were staying at some place that was a little bit more down market. It was still obviously very lovely.
So we asked this question about
great. Yeah, please.
What type of property you would choose for your next vacation. Only 21% said that they would stay at a more affordable property. 62% said, I'll stay at the same price property.
I think that's that aspirational piece of it. Is nobody wants to say, I'm going to downgrade my vacation.
Right, but they might.
It's not fun.
Right, at the time of booking, once they actually once they open their first wallet, they say,
but there's a dynamic here that we haven't really talked about. So even the consumers who are saying they're expecting to pay less, how much of that is the fact that they're not going to fly?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
If I could go back to a little bit of a HUD's thing for a second, I'd like to contribute to the point of this. And this is an inspiration that came from a conversation with Ed, actually, and it's been successful in one of my markets quite well. There's a gap point between the impact of the unemployment monies and those that it didn't help, and those that it didn't make much of a difference for. It really created a three-tier situation. And to put some data and math together, if you look at the baseline income of the impact of the enhanced unemployment in the United States to the average amount of money that somebody got, you're in the mid 30,000 range, 36,000 annual income. Add tax percentage to that, run it up to 40%, $40,000. Then you have a gap point up to about 72,000, 68,000 up to 75,000. That then creates it where it helps with the fact that they save a average percentage of monies plus the contribution of the unemployment, gives them a cushion that they would have the aspirational opportunity to actually take a vacation should the opportunity come up while they have the time consumption to do so. That goes into your two-wallet conversation of how much money can I save in the fundamental aspect of travel, like Dad just said with flight, and Tim, what you just said with room rates, okay? And then what you're doing for second wallet, which is what I'm going to blow my drinking money, food money, whatever I can spend it on money kind of stuff. Well, when it comes to the marketing that we're doing, gift certificates with an enhanced value resonate really well with the lower income side of that conversation. They feel like they're getting free addition to what they're purchasing for future travel. We're selling good certificates for people that have lower incomes. By the same token, the gift certificate moment is successful, but not as successful as the higher income people that are more looking about a future discount opportunity, which allows them to book with a refundable opportunity. And so we've literally we've separated our marketing strategies to be targeted, economically based on who's resonating with which message better. We're sending both messages to both categories, but one is more targeted about the value proposition compared to the other, and they're resonating that way as well. So there is an impact of income towards the marketing strategy. If the to your point of where they're spending the money from both wallets. So I just want to throw that into the question.
Just going back to the idea of the second wallet, it seems hotels are going to face two problems here. The first one is trying to increase the take up of the food and beverage and the on property upselling behind a perspex wall with a cough mask on and 2 meters away from someone. It's going to take the hospitality out of hospitality when you look like one of the good or bad guys from ET, as we touched on a couple of weeks
ago. They were good guys.
Secondly, it's going to be harder for the hotels they're not going to be able to make as money from things like food and beverage. You're going to have enforced social distancing. You're going to be able to fit less covers in your restaurants.
But room service, man. Are you going to get more room service that way?
I can't say I agree with you, Ben. I mean, that's business. But, I mean, so one is you do all the upselling digitally, or you do a majority of the upselling digitally. And then two, you change the way you think about food and beverage. So you have to-go boxes for lunch, or you have whatever. There's a lot of different ways to do that. Or you just have a F&B, going back to Lauren's point, you have, and a lot of our hotels do this even before, is you offer a food and beverage credit. They pay $40 and it's credit for $50, right? So they get some extra dollars free. Tons of hotels do that globally. So there's I think, my job is to figure out how the world has changed from a merchandising upselling standpoint. And we think it's digital, which is a lot. There's a lot of that opportunity out there already. But also hotels, and we have to help them with this, is to think more creatively about those ancillary offers and not only what they are, but how you present them. So,
you have an opportunity for a short period of time to use an incredibly powerful motivator. Right. It's one of my favorite motivators, which is guilt. And here's how you do it.
I thought it was intimidation. You keep changing.
You thank your guests for everything that they're doing and explain to them all the families they're helping by traveling with you. And then you present them with the other things they can do.
Praise my Catholic mother. I'm going to give you money right now, Ed.
Guilt? Majority of people are programmed via guilt by their parents and their upbringing and their religious beliefs and even their schooling. Guilt is programmed into human beings. Man, if you ever can tap into guilt, it's such a powerful trigger.
Ed reinforcing his position as the evil genius on this show.
So just to go back to the point, Valyn, that you mentioned there, I agree that the upselling possibly digitally. Do you not think there's a certain quality cutoff point of hotel where the guest wouldn't accept a to-go box, where the aspirational travel, they're paying for the experience?
So I always put on my resident luxury guy hat. The answer to that is you're correct. If we do it in an actual to-go box, I would say it comes down to how you present it, right? It's you guest. I have fought the fight for years. When I first started working for the leading hotels of the world in 2008, keep this in mind, 2007 rather, I had people, even in 2007, who were telling me nobody is going to book a $1,000 a night room online. Tell me flat out, right? Period. Which clearly could not have been more wrong. You know, we turned around my first year there and did about $100 million in reservations at an ADR of about $700 a night.
Rich people want convenience too.
Right, exactly.
They just don't want it in a cardboard box. They want it
in a cardboard box.
Unless the cardboard box was ethically sourced,
cardboard box,
6 time recycled, and has some type of really cool artsy design stamped on it that makes them feel good about their
exactly
decision.
right.
But only if it was done by the families of the hotel workers there, that they made them themselves. That's the
but it comes down to there's a lot of opportunities out of this, and I think hotels need to think really, really hard about this, particularly for independents. You know, I think the chains have a lot of work to do here too, in terms of product innovation, in terms of what does F&B look like, what does room service look like, what does the to-go box look like, you know.
Right, and let's also not forget the amount of things people have been deprived of and how humans generally act when they deprive themselves of something, what normally comes after deprivation. And, you know, excess, exactly. This is why diets are such a challenge for the mass populace, is because after enough time of depriving yourself of something, the next thing you know, you've blacked out and there were 5 empty bags of Doritos next to you.
Just 5.
Exactly, by the way.
Have you been watching
a dozen Krispy Kremes. I mean, you just never know what's going to happen.
Right.
But this all goes back to
wallet
Lily's
is
point.
completely emptied out.
But this all goes back to Lily's point, I think, that you mentioned earlier on there about the massive spike, and then it's going to tail off potentially lower. Because what you're saying there, Valyn, you've got good to-go boxes, and that, you know, people are going to have room service. That just sounds like lockdown in a different room to me, if I'm honest. But people are going to want to go out and experience that because it's not the same room that I'm stuck in here for months. When the reality actually settles in, and I've gone and had like semi-lockdown in a different room, then that's where you're going to see it, that's going to the fear that I have is the curtailment and the drop down.
Yeah, could very well be. And so the hotels have to, especially those with good size F&B outlets, can do both. Yeah, so they can set their tables, you know, 1 meter apart or 2 meters apart, and have, you know, artistic cardboard boxes deliver food. It's just, that's not going to be for everyone, right?
But this is also where some of them are already handling this by pushing their tables out into their parking lots. It's, you know, happening everywhere where they're, like putting,
was that in the parking lot? Would you like a window or the Humvee? You know,
right.
Actually, I can share this right
now. If you've ever dined at some of the really expensive places in downtown LA, that's literally what you're sitting in anyways, is their parking lot, because they're over their capacity. And you think it's fancy because they put some slotted fence with fake ivy up.
I have real world data on this, by the way. One of my hotels has a fine dining restaurant that reopens this weekend. They've been closed for the last 6 weeks rather. They reopen. They are doing only outdoor seating. They're in a warm weather location. They're doing only outdoor seating, smaller things. They are sold out for every night this weekend.
Yep.
Sold out.
And there was also in Corpus Christi, when they opened the beaches, just I think it was last week, and the Omni there, which has 475 rooms, opened up for weekend stays. They sold out within 48 hours, and the beaches were packed. And that tells me that even though we're seeing, you know, in the study, you know, fear and scared and whatever, we have this equally competing desire to just, you know, forget it. I want to get the heck out. I don't even care anymore, because otherwise there wouldn't be packed beaches with people risking their health and safety.
But they are not risking their health and safety because they are outside. They are over 6 feet apart.
If they're over 6 feet apart,
they're in a well-ventilated area.
My source says not so much with the 6 feet apart happening.
Every place that I've seen that opened up, I go by and they're supposed to be following the COVID rule. Not a thing. They're playing volleyball and the volleyball.
Well, it doesn't apply if you know each other.
Yeah.
Social distancing is only for strangers, guys.
But even if there's a 10-person limit, there's like 20 people covered around a table. It's like, okay, guys.
Do we have to put a disclaimer on Ed that this isn't actual medical advice?
That is not actual medical device.
Yeah.
And you will not see a medical degree on this wall.
One other thing I want to point out to Ben and Tristan's point, because I think you're asking really important questions about how to think about this. You know, we've been using the phrase backyard and bundle, but we're using the bundle slightly different in a slightly different sense. We got to come up with a better word for this. We're deliberately not using the word packaging. Talk to the other folks in your market who are also having all the same problems that you're having. And I don't mean necessarily other hotels, so that could be fine, but other restaurants, other retailers, other experiences of how you help each other drive, people to spend more money while they're in market. And so think about, so it's not just, hey, I'm socially isolating in a different room and I'm getting my food delivered in a cardboard box in the room, but how can they get out? And, it's a great time to make friends with the other people in your CVB. It's a great time to make friends with other people in your local market to say, how do we tell the destination most appropriately in a way that people can get out of the room and do cool stuff?
2 things to that point, and it has been very advantageous for us in one particular market. A lot of the restaurants in the area are still dramatically hurt, and even though they can put tables in parking lots, people are still not taking advantage of it and so forth. We've shared our marketing for them. We've shared our audiences for them in the sense of, you got to go to this Korean restaurant, so forth. If you are anywhere in Vancouver, not to sell to stay at our hotel, to sell to go to that restaurant. And we have built wicked cool relationships with the restaurants. Now, granted, these were some of the restaurants we had already stolen most of the keywords from because they were doing it themselves.
But it's not wrong.
We got going. But the other thing we did, which is kind of interesting to this too, there was a group that really wanted to meet for networking. And we had a very small conference area space. So everybody, because there's a difference in group sales conference size, group sales room blocks. So, I'm speaking to the choir when I say that, but we kept the group room block. We spread out, socially conscious distances, so forth, the conference themselves so they could have, and they split physical attendance. So they came down, they did their thing, and then the people were watching it virtually from their rooms above, but they could still network after. They didn't have to be in the same room. They could go off to other places, restaurants around the area, whatever, but they could still physically do the networking component of the conference without creating a density issue for the meetings themselves. And I thought that was a cute, a new way of getting the attendance, keeping the room block without creating the issues of, you're trying to shove too many people in one single room. They came down for their lunches, as you said, their bags and boxes, all that stuff was provided for them. Breakfast as well. Same thing. We had breakfast table too, that was put down, and it really kept them to keep their room block as well. So I thought it was a neat adaptive way of keeping a conference without creating a density issue.
And also we just need to keep in mind, if you want to know what to do to make the consumer feel safe enough to congregate, all you have to do is look at what Home Depot, Starbucks, and the grocery stores have done. Because you can't tell me like all of those people are there in mass because they have to get something done. It's because they're choosing to do something, and they're choosing to be in a crowd. I don't know what your Home Depots look like, but my Home Depot, I've had to wait in a Universal Studios style queue that they set up to get in because they were controlling how many people would get in. Yeah. And honestly, I wasn't annoyed by that. And I'm usually incredibly annoyed about having to wait.
Your waiting level annoyance is sort of,
Yeah, we love it over in the UK. Our grocery stores didn't even need to set that up. We automatically did it because we're British and we love to queue up. Right. That's just, we just did it anyway.
I think that's a really good point, Ed, is that people's expectations, at least initially, aren't going to be the same as they were before. Yep. So they're willing to put up with more stuff, especially if they feel like that stuff protects them or gives them some idea of protection.
They don't have much else better to do, unlike usually where you're competing for 1,000 or 100,000 different things that this consumer could be doing.
Right.
Choices are very limited right now.
Right.
Right.
I think Harvard even has a little survey, 2-question survey out where she's asking, would you prefer to go to a place that requires you to wear a mask or doesn't require you to wear a mask? You know, I mean, she only has like little 2 questions, and she did it anonymously and stuff. I'm going to be curious to see what she comes up with numbers of people's responses. Is to just something simple to ask that question. Are you liking the idea that a store mandates that you have to wear a mask, or are you okay with the idea that they don't care that you don't have a mask when you walk in?
They should subdivide that data by also asking what their favorite cable news network is. Maybe you had other data you wanted to share.
Do you vote Republican or Democrat?
Are you Fox News? Yeah. Melissa, we're sorry. We kind of railed off some of your data.
Your data has inspired a bit of conversation.
You know, nothing new there. Left alone with the wolves.
I would love to kind of follow up that 2-question survey there, Lauren, with a little news topic we did not have on our list, but not sure if you've seen about the restaurant in Texas that has told their employees don't bother coming to work if you wear a mask.
Whoa!
Because it does not fit our brand for you to be wearing a mask, so you will not be employed here if you come to work in a mask.
What, the brand of having a live waiters?
I suspect their turnover is going to go up.
Yes.
It's quite the PR issue for them right now.
There's one word for that, and it's Texas. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. So, Melissa, other interesting data points you want to?
Yes, please, Melissa. Bring us back.
Sure. We'll go back. I guess we should talk about, because it already came up, we should talk about open area destinations versus high touch / highly populated areas in terms of how people are willing to travel. So we did ask that question, you know, how likely after restrictions are lifted would you be willing to travel to these places? We broke it down by time frame within 1 month, 1 to 3 months, 3 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, more than a year. And then we've asked beach destinations, somewhere in nature, small town, major city, ski destination, theme park, and foreign country. The last 2 surveys have been very consistent. You can very clearly see that these open spaces are far more likely to be visited within 30 days of restrictions being lifted, and also within 1 to 3 months after that. So in total, up to 3 months, where as soon as you hit those tight spaces, we're down to under 15% within 30 days that are willing to travel. So that's been consistent, but we did break this out by age, and it is so dramatically different by how old you are and the risk tolerance that people have within that first 30 days. As time goes on, the age groups get a lot more close in terms of their behavior. So within 1 month, millennials they're ready to go. Like 50% or more are willing to go somewhere in nature or in a small town, versus boomers that are like 20-ish, 25% willing to travel to any of these open spaces within the first 30 days.
So the other thing here is that, you know, the last 3, ski destination, theme park, foreign country, are all costlier, right? They're bigger ticket items rather than, you know, if you're near the beach or you're within a couple hours drive of the beach, that's a lower cost ticket.
And there's not a lot of June skiing.
Right. not in the southeast. Exactly.
You know, actually, it is snowing today in Michigan. I just wanted to point that out. So you just never know.
But it is also only May 8th, and most indicated not wanting to travel in the next 30 days.
It will snow tomorrow in Boston, so
right.
We'll not be grilling tomorrow night where I'm.
No.
I mean, it also usually doesn't snow in May, Ed, so who knows? It might be snowing in July, too. You just never know.
Has global cooling happened from us all being sent to our rooms?
Apparently.
It was 50 degrees this morning.
Hey, the aliens have shown up according to the government, so nobody cares about that.
Yeah, there are UFOs now. Why hasn't that hit our news? Like, what's the impact of UFOs?
Arizona has just sucked up all of the heat, and that's why none of you are getting any.
I mean, that is how a heat sink works.
Yes. Right. Melissa, how happy are you to be here?
I'm so happy. I'm so happy.
Welcome to the show.
But
it's fine.
You know, I like this in that, you know, it's it feels sort of, the answers feel somewhat intuitive, even broken down by age. to sort of financial and location. Yeah.
So, but what I kind of thought was more interesting though is still looking within 1 to 3 months after things are being lifted. So those first open area spaces are much more leveled out. But then even as we look into those more densely populated, yes, I know we're not going skiing in June, but you can just still see within 1 to 3 months, there's that discrepancy again within those high touch or densely populated areas between millennials.
Could you all, because one of the challenges I have with the caveat of this question is the caveat of once restrictions are lifted, it's not clear what restrictions you're talking about, which potentially is skewing some of this data. It could be potentially skewing some of this data way to the positive because someone in their mind may be thinking of, social distancing restrictions. So all of a sudden 30 days after social distancing restrictions is literally 6 to 7 months out. I would love to see a pure play question of how likely are you to travel in May, June, or July in these areas to potentially cut back on some of that, kind of challenge of personal interpretation.
Or maybe just phrasing as, assuming restrictions are not a concern at the time.
But then you still don't know who is concerned with it and who isn't. What I'm actually trying to see is can you put something out that will have less interpretation as they answer, and then compare that to see if there's any difference, or are we understanding interpretation well in this?
Well, which question are we on? Because I missed it. Sorry, I had to jump off real quick.
This is how likely you are to travel in time frame once restrictions are lifted.
So we also asked the question, when do you plan on booking and when do you plan on traveling based on month? So we do have that in the results. So that would eliminate your concerns here.
Yeah.
This is a lot of these questions to kind of
sentiment
get behind the sentiment is trying to figure out the trend. What directional information do we have to make decisions, right? We're certainly not a professional study company that you would spend tens of thousands of dollars to get a very unbiased, proper results. What we're trying to do is say, from 2 weeks ago to this time to the next 2 weeks, how are things shifting, and what can we interpret from that? So I agree with you. I think there's some bias, but I don't think it matters.
I'm not even concerned about the bias. I'm curious about how much, if any, bias is in there. Because I'm not saying I necessarily feel like people are going to answer differently. However, I'm curious how big the phenomenon of each person's individual decisions are going to be in this. Like, when you say restrictions lifted to someone in our industry, we're thinking specifically hotels being allowed to take guests or VR being allowed to take guests. However, there are other restrictions in place. So someone like Lily, who is letter to the line of you said this and it's exactly this, she may be thinking all restrictions, which potentially in her mind and potentially in reality doesn't happen until next year.
Sure. But again, if we're looking at trends with a sample size.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What's that?
No.
I had the same sample size. We're doing that thing where we both say you go, and then we both go, and then we say you go. And then we both go.
No, you hang up. You hang up.
You go.
Yeah. Lauren, after you. So.
I just quickly asked the unscientific question, and I got a few responses, but 5 out of the 7 were waiting up to a year, which I find surprising if they're listening to the show about hospitality and travel, that we would be personally willing to wait until the full execution of knowing what's happening would allow us to say we travel. That's.
Ask them how many of them are currently working.
So that my 30 days versus 60 days is just a lack of consistency in the question structure. So in some of them you ask by month, and some of them you ask by blocks of days. And so I would so it's easier to compare answers if you're you're doing apples to apples as opposed to apples to oranges.
I
think we just need to point out the obvious thing right here.
Right. I have one quick question about this, and Ed, you asked this before. I think it's a reasonable way to help kind of intuit some data from this. First of all, these are great questions. These are great questions, and there's some good stuff in here. One of the questions I have is, when you talk about people's breakdown of destination, we've got beach destination, somewhere in nature, small town, major city, ski destination, theme park, etc. Is that a question that you have historically asked in terms of where people go? Because, when I look at theme park 1 to 3 months out, it comes up a fair bit compared to where it is within the next month, but it's still small relative to the, beach destination, somewhere in nature, small town. Is that distinct at this time, or is that a question you ask all the time and those ratios are about the same when people are traveling?
Yeah. No, these are not questions we've asked before, but I think to your point, if you look at something like ski destinations, right, there's certainly a bias on that because the majority of people aren't into skiing. If we segmented it, if we had a preliminary question of, do you go skiing before that, and then we only looked at that data from them, I think, yes, we would probably see a very different pattern.
Right.
But again, what we're trying to do is just, yes, there are some biases. We're just trying to understand how they shift, right? So if we see something like theme parks go up 10% between this period and the next 2 weeks, I think that's an indication of some meaningful change, and that's why we're doing this. We're trying to understand when there's a meaningful change.
And what's interesting about this is even with all the potential, bias that's built into this, it's still showing you the actual trends of consumer sentiment. The bias won't be enough. I think except for the how are you going to spend your money, I do think you guys got that one wrong because it's nothing but responsible decisions and then one that isn't. I would love to see you flip that on one of the upcoming ones just to see, do people err? If you did all irresponsible and one responsible decision, would it completely flip the results?
So, Ed, you want to flip to what?
I'm going to flip to an irresponsible decision.
So I just want to make sure that I'm also interpreting this destination data right. When I look at the international travel, what you're saying is if I go to Europe within the next 6 months, I can avoid the crowds, yes?
No, because domestically, all the Europeans are going to be there.
Yeah, to be honest with you, half of Europe still got their borders closed. So, we still don't know whether it's actually going to open up and when. Whether you'll
this is after restrictions are opened.
Fair enough. Okay, good
fair.
Point. But still, I think it will.
How are you going to get to Europe without getting on an airplane?
After restrictions are lifted, Ed.
Right? No. I'm saying you really want to get on an airplane for that long?
No issues with that.
Wow.
I think to Stuart's point where he's talking about this to Stuart's point where he's saying this is a directional flow, I totally understand that. And again, I think the data is great. I think what I found interesting is that you're continuing to do these surveys as well, because I don't know about you guys, but I'm noticing that last week was very different from this week, and it's even a world away from 2 weeks ago, because we're in such a microcosm of what what lockdown means to individual people, the circumstances, the whole, even nation by nation, even state by state, county by county. It's very, very different, across the globe, and people are going to be in different places at different times. And the slightest bit of information that comes out from the government about change or the potential has a huge impact, I think, than it probably would have done normally. Normally, when something happens in the government, it's it's happening again. Doesn't affect my day-to-day life. This really does now. Day-to-day life is being affected on a scale that's probably unprecedented since World War II. Certainly over here in Europe as well. I imagine to maybe a lesser or greater degree over in the States, but the impact of news coming out and changes is probably bigger than when you would do a normal survey, because that survey, the statistical relevance of that will probably last longer. I think if you were to do this survey this week or next week, the results will be very could potentially be very much different, again, depending on the changes of circumstances that come out.
Yeah, what's interesting about that, though...
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say what's interesting about that is we've done it 2 weeks. We did it on, on the 30th, we did it on the 16th, and on the 2nd of April, and we saw probably a bigger shift between the first two than we did between the second and the third one. So that rate of the pace of change has slowed a little bit in the last 2 weeks.
I think as more markets start to open and we see whether or not there is indeed an increase in infections, if there is a spike in infections that becomes publicized, that would be a very interesting time to relaunch.
Well, the bottom line is any increase in infections we know will be widely publicized. It's so the question's going to be is how many people look at it and ask themselves, okay, even if the rate doubles, is that dangerous to what this was all about? Which is that going to overload the hospital systems? Is that going to be a reason to do this? Because I also think, and I forget who coined it a bunch of shows ago, but that idea of revenge travel. How many people have been wrecked financially because their business, has been closed? Who's going to look at it and say, I am never locking down again, and actually behaviorally make decisions now around that, which may include traveling? I'm curious. And I know it's funny. I actually think through this conversation as we've been having it, all of this stuff is a circular conversation, because even with the insights,
are you doing a show, Ed?
Well, actually, I'm going to be fair. I've been the one often causing it to go back in a circle.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you, Ed, there, because nobody's disagreed with you yet, and I believe that this needs to be done.
So you believe I've been pulling us in a linear fashion. But one of the challenges is so much has changed that I hate to say it because it sounds like really insensitive. This is super exciting. This part of it, how are people going to act, is really exciting. I'm really excited to see what happens, how people change, how behavior, what parts of influence. There are so many influences right now. Normally we're talking in any type of big event, there's one or two influencing factors. There are so many factors at play here that, the results are just going to be really interesting, and that's exciting.
I suggest the word intriguing.
No, I'm excited about it. I'm not just intrigued. I'm excited to see how people are going to act.
Ed, by the way, likes to stand around and watch car wrecks, too.
Yes.
So I have a question about question number 15. So I really like that. I like that it hasn't changed. And it should tell every hotel, what they should do. But my real question is, did Ed pay for that placement in that question?
No money to pay.
I think he guilt tripped them into doing it. There was no money. It was just a guilt.
Tim, before we get off the topic on the last one, you wanted to add something to it, I thought.
Well, I sent Lauren a private note to answer his simple 2-question survey, and I'll be happy to share my answer. I'm sort of I agree with Ed, except for the exciting word, but I agree with Ed completely in terms of I don't even know what my own behavior is going to be. Right? I'm currently employed. I am a huge travel enthusiast. I am climbing the damn walls of my house, desperate to get out and travel again because I love to travel. And I have no idea when I will feel it's okay to travel, right? Focus group 1 here. I don't want to get sick. I can't afford to get sick. My business depends on my ability to actually go out and do the things that I do. So what it is for me as an individual, and I don't think I'm alone on this, otherwise I wouldn't do the focus group 1 on this. Mm-hmm. My tolerance level for what will be an acceptable risk level before I'll travel again, I don't know, because I haven't seen anything that makes me feel terribly confident about that.
But has that changed, though? Do you feel like
it hasn't
today
changed
your tolerance level may be a lower threshold than it was 2 weeks ago?
No, I'm with him on this one.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, I think someone brought it up earlier about like there's this cognitive dissonance going on, right, with people. The longer they head up, it's like a rubber band that's winding up and just wants to go. And so I think we can look to psychology. Humans are very predictable animals. You know,
Sure.
if you look throughout history, you can typically see the psychological phenomena that occurs in any situation that drives the majority of people. And I think as a cognitive dissonance begins to take hold and people are very much getting to the point where they're a little more cavalier, a little more willing to take risk, then confirmation bias is going to start kicking in, right? Where we're going to start picking and choosing the information that reinforces our position. Just like when we're looking at reviews, we're looking for reviews that reinforce us. So, you know, the media stories that scared us a while ago, we're now going to maybe not pay as much attention to, but we're going to cling on to that one story of hope. And I think it's going to just create this acceleration of some people, and everyone is going to be at a different rate, but a lot of people are going to get to the point where they're like, screw it, you know, I'm just going to do it. And we're beginning to see that. We're already seeing that.
I want to respond to Stuart's point just for one quick second. I mean, first of all, I completely agree. Laura and I have had this fight on the show about, you know, the different types of data. I always look at and lean towards the behavioral data because there's nothing more predictive than what people do, period.
Yep.
I feel very strong about that. I will say for me personally, I've not yet hit that point. Now, will I hit that point and will I start to get some confirmation bias and data that supports that? Maybe. But for me personally, I can tell you I haven't hit that point yet.
And what will be intriguing is if there's a spike in infections, right? So that's the wild card here is that as more people travel, as more people get to that point where they just cannot take it anymore, and they are so deep into their own cognitive bias that it won't affect them, or it won't matter. It won't be a negative impact if I go back to my normal life. And then suddenly in their area there's a spike or they get sick. Then what?
And by the way, the flip side of that is also true, Valyn. You make a great point, because if people start to travel, if things start to improve, and we don't see a spike, that could be the confirmation bias.
That's right.
To drive.
And then I'm interested to see behaviorally. I'm interested to see behaviorally after the first jump.
Yeah.
How does it feel? So I was just talking to someone yesterday morning that had no choice. They needed to attend a funeral. They were getting on a plane yesterday.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him because I'm like, okay, so how do you feel about it? And he's like, I don't know. I mean, I think as I experience it, there will be things that scare me. This is a professional traveler. This is one of us, someone who's always in the air. I'm really interested to see how he feels afterwards.
Yeah.
If he's going to immediately start booking trips because the unknown is done on that section of it. Because I actually, personally, I'm ready to travel not on an airplane. However, I know it's likely in the next 2 weeks, maybe 3, I may have to get on an airplane for something I'm working on. And I'm thinking about that. And I'm like, wow, I'm actually not looking forward to the airplane aspect of it. But then I wonder how I'm going to feel after.
Melissa, you can predict how you're going to feel because you've already done that on a smaller scale. The first time you went to a grocery store and the last time you went to a grocery store felt completely different, even though nothing changed materially.
I'm not going to lie to you. I was the guy who just didn't care about the grocery store. I wasn't.
But what we are talking about here, though, when we're talking about behavior, we're talking about fear. This is, and it's a great motivator. It's the reason why the human species has survived, because it fears the things that are bad for us and make sure we look after ourselves. We've got a lot of different media outlets, media sources feeding that fear right now. But I'd be very interested to know from somebody, and I wish he was on here now. But I'd be very interested to hear from Griffin, because he's lived through that fear. And we're all taking this because I'm assuming that everybody in this call has not had coronavirus COVID-19.
No. Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of as well, exactly. But there's going to be a big chunk of people out there now, especially if there's a second spike, that will have had it. their behavior, I imagine, is going to be very, very different, unless you believe that you can catch it twice thing, which we still don't.
Well, but even if you do believe you can catch it twice, I mean, I got to be honest with you. If you're one of those people, and we've seen news stories of people whose parachutes fail and they fall and live, you can't tell them anything anymore. They're indestructible.
Yes, absolutely.
So
And I
if
think
you
that the
had
more, like-
coronavirus and it
Right.
didn't kill you,
Yes, I am.
is your superpower.
Hey, Ed, did one of your parachutes fail? Is that what happened here?
Yes. Straight, and I was
already
facing
happening.
head down.
Oh,
Melissa's been trying to get in forever. Hold on, let's take it. Melissa's been, she doesn't know that she has to have a sharp elbow. She's going to say, stop.
Melissa, the
All
floor
right.
is yours.
So this is something that I'm looking at. I'm telling you, I stare at data all day long, especially now. But I have been following, again, booking trends since all of this started. Looking at real live bookings since April 1st for our clients. May is when people are booking. 40% of our bookings are for May. And that
Your booking
has
window
changed
is about the
as
same
time
as always.
progressed. If we started off like late summer as a percentage of bookings, and then all of a sudden May was like, zoop,
Mm.
you don't want to get
And
that.
honestly, I think had you guys opened in April, it would have happened in April.
I agree.
Because the demand looked like it was there. The traffic was there. There was just no conversion for that time period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lily, you were going to say something too. I apologize. I was stomped on everybody when I did that.
Well, Stuart mentioned psychology, so obviously I have to come back to that yet again on this show because it's just rampant. So, I mean, to Ed's point, first of all, the more times you go to the grocery store and don't come home with coronavirus, the more likely you are to feel like you're invincible, right? And I think that that's going to happen with travel as well. We're going to like test the water. Okay, a shark didn't eat us. Let's go in ankle deep. Shark still didn't eat us. So I think that there's going to be kind of this back and forth because we can't escape news about coronavirus, which makes it feel like it's floating around in the air the second you walk out the door. But it's not. And so it's almost the way that it's portrayed as this kind of ever-present threat is going to be offset by the fact that not everybody's going to contract it when they first go out. And so people are going to more and more feel like a sense of tolerance that they're not going to get the virus.
I'll add one dimension to that, and that is the timing. As Ed has eloquently put in the previous show, it's not whether or not the virus is in existence, it's the tolerance of our medical system to be able to facilitate the infectious rate of those who need advanced medical care. So when they're easing these restrictions in stages, it's really just, as Ed has pointed out, acknowledging that our medical situation is able to facilitate should the demand swell. We have the capacity
but that's not what's on people's minds.
No, well,
What's
no.
on their minds is the
I think
infection.
it's a timing of, I don't want to be in that second wave. I don't mind being ahead of the wave, behind the wave, but I don't want to be the person that gets refused medical attention because they took down the temp tents, they took down all this stuff, and now there's a line out the front of the hospital. I'm in pain and I can't get in. I don't want that to be me. That is probably a condition of how I look at it.
So what's going to be complicated about this, and I feel bad because this is definitely going to be a circular comment. I fully
that is this show.
Exactly.
And that's
rename it.
now.
But there's going to be so much mixed data right now around that specifically because one, we're having this conversation in May. We're not having this conversation in February, right? We're not having this conversation in November going into slower seasons or things like that. So first we're entering higher demand periods typically anyway. Secondly, there's some data, and I want to be really clear. Not a doctor. Don't play one on TV. No one should take medical advice from anything I say ever. But there's some data that suggests that maybe outdoors heat, humidity, etc., suppresses the virus to some degree. Maybe. So what will be interesting, and I'm not going to use the word exciting by any stretch, but interesting is are people traveling more during the period when the virus is more dormant, and thus we don't have any outbreak that happens, with people traveling that reinforces a behavior that is actually more risky as we get into the fall or the like. I don't know the answer to that.
Economically, that would be the best case scenario is that happens because that means the backlash of that would be hitting around a time that we're more likely better equipped to treat it and cut down on the death rate, which means it would be less likely that we'll impose strong economic restrictions because of the uptake in it. And then C, that means I'll see all of you in Florida in November, and you're welcome to come here because it's going to be nice and warm.
That's assuming we ever wanted to go to Florida in the first place.
You're in Arizona. You can't throw rocks in that glass house that is Arizona.
Hey, I didn't suggest everybody should come to Arizona. So.
Speaking of seeing you all in the future, I actually have to jump, but I will look forward to seeing you all next week on the show.
And I look forward to speaking to you this afternoon.
This is great data. This is very, very cool. Please keep it up and keep sharing it. It's fantastic stuff. I want to give all the kudos to Fuel, but especially Melissa for the work she and her team do, because she takes all the credit all the time. And so
Stuart's all around walking. Look what I did.
True story.
No, this is great stuff. Looking forward to seeing the next
Tim, if people want to find you and what you do, where is it they can find you, sir?
TimPeter.com. I am TC Peter on Twitter. Stay safe, stay well, everybody. See you all.
Thanks, Tim.
Bye, Tim.
Bye, Tim.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I know we've kind of thrown some questions into how this data could be better, but let's be honest, this data is so far superior to much of the rest of the data out there because of its sample size. And I got to be honest with you, I could give you all the flaws in all the questions across all the other ones because it's easy to do that when you're not the one who built it. This data is exciting. I actually had a presentation 2 weeks ago where I primarily focused the consumer sentiment section of that on Fuel's results because they are the most valid of all of the ones I've seen because of the sample size. So kudos to you.
Thanks.
Melissa.
Yeah,
No, it's not you, Stuart. Melissa.
Hey, I'm thanking you on behalf of Melissa, but I would say we don't take offense to any of the questions and the holes you're poking. I think that makes us smarter and address, I think some of them are valid. Some of them were strategic from our perspective because obviously we want this data to help folks, but we also, we want it to support our existing philosophies as well where we can. So some of it's deliberate, but some of it, I think you have valid concerns that we can address in the next one. And we're going to continue to push this out every 2 weeks for the foreseeable future. So we've seen very little fatigue on our database so far.
Well, and what I'm really curious about is if you can section out the ones who didn't respond this time and ask them one question. Have you traveled already?
Yeah.
I'm really curious how many people are going to stop responding because they're back in the thick of it.
Yeah. Yeah. But, we keep telling people this, and I've said it on the show, but every single hotel should be sending out a survey to their database right now before it's too late and before you lose the opportunity because people are willing to give their opinions. And we're getting 5 times as many responses as we typically do when we send a request to this database. We're not incentivizing filling out. We usually will say enter to win for a Visa gift card or something. We're not doing that. We're just saying, hey, we need your help. Please answer these questions so we can better understand your travel in the industry. And folks are just willing to give us whatever. And you can then use this information in your marketing strategy. You can start to see, okay, these group of people don't want to travel. I'm not going to bombard them right now. These group of people really care about what we're doing to protect guests. Let's focus the messaging on that. You can get really granular with your marketing. It's going to be more.
I'm a lot less austere than you are. We're offering a $50 advance discount for future purchase if they just answer a few questions for us. And we're getting, like to your point, amazing siloed information of data. We're literally segmenting them out as to their interest categorization, propensity for travel, demographics of interest, previous history of travel, just flat out just asking people and wholeheartedly offering that up. And we're getting our CRM and people that haven't stayed with it. We're just opening it up to the public now too. Like, hey.
And by the way, the other advice to hotels that I would give that maybe isn't clear in this is not only are your guests going to be willing to answer most questions you ask them at this point, so are all the professionals in this industry. How many of you have just agreed to get on a call with someone who had a question just because you want to help?
And you have the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ed, you've been on our thing every day for the every day we have it at noon, where it's just anybody in hospitality wants to join it. It's we are hospitality. That's the Bentley, and you come in, you just chat about what. There's no like this, no forum.
Well, heck, I've done it to all of you on something we're working on, where I hit all you up for free advice, and I appreciate all the free advice I got. So now's the time to ask. Everyone's feeling generous.
But there's also those that rise above, and I'll call out everybody on the call on this. Everybody has realized that collectively we can help each other, and we're not holding back on the support of each other. And where it used to be secret sauce. Oh, you're there. I'm your. There is no competition. It's like, how can we help everybody? I've never seen anybody on this call not offer help to somebody if they're asked about this. So I say, well, I usually get paid for that. No, right now I'm helping you. What is it I can help you with? And that's all of it. Everybody, all of you have done that for me, and I've known you've done it for other people I've talked to. So, and there's agencies that aren't, and let's see who comes out of the darkness.
Well, isn't that why we're in this industry? Why you can tell the people that are passionate about this industry because they care deeply about people and they do want to help. That's why we're in the hospitality industry. Like Tim often says, we're definitely not in it for the money, so it's about helping each other. And I'll give you a specific example where this has rung true with us during the situation. So when we were figuring out what we could do, what was our small little part to maybe help some folks, we said, let's reach out to our competition and have them on the podcast and give their expertise to our audience because we felt like it would be beneficial. So we've had Screen Pilot, we've had Milestone on the show. Now we've gotten to the point where we develop relationships with these guys that Milestone has referred us business now. This is crazy times. Like we would be considered competitors in a previous life, and now we're there helping support each other's business.
Yeah.
Because we believe in hospitality and we want to help as many people as we can right now.
Yeah, it's true.
What happened to Lily? Oh.
Lily is tired of our crap.
Yeah, Lily left us. You know what?
So, Valyn, you did ask that question of what did I pay to get that positioning? I answered it. I've been featuring this data in all my public
I've been your hype man, by the way. Ed, I've been your hype man recently because Ottawa, your HSMI that you're going to be doing the presentation for, they're bringing in the BC chapter.
I know. It's
so I was telling them they do a little social hour at 6:30 on Thursday evenings because, of course, their time zone. And we're talking about it, and they are totally stoked about you doing the presentation. They heard nothing but awesome stuff.
Because I heard it from you, so now I'm screwed. Really wasn't after the presentation.
A couple of fish and a loaf of bread, and they feed everybody. Well, that's what Tristen does. I know Tristen does.
I was going to say, you've used that one on me.
I threw that one on you. Yeah, I know you go.
That's my wife. I'm thinking, I am being set up to fail here in so many ways. Fishes and bread? Are you kidding me?
No. Hey, Melissa, was there any other numbers numbers you want to throw out more from the report of anything else? Because Robert did at the last 11th hour, 59-minute hour, throw us a list of stuff, which only tells the testament of how busy and crazy he is. For Robert to not be on the show, to also have to wait until literally 11:05 or something to send out his list, the man must be like no sleep because he's Mr. Data. We know that. And he's being probably pulled in 15,000 directions. Was there anything else you guys want to make sure didn't get missed on the report?
I just have one other thing, and that was what we started the whole conversation with, in that there is hope on the horizon. So we asked people what one word they would use to describe their feeling about travel now. And yes, safety and scary has consistently been blatantly the top concern or thought. But on this round, we have a whole bunch of other positive words that we have not seen before, like freedom and excited and relax and ready. So I say that's, and hopeful. Let's not forget that one.
So one other thing that isn't in their data report, but is relevant to Fuel as a company, because they probably had something to do with this, is I was passed a super confidential report this morning that had data on which destinations have moved the most in total searches week
I
over
saw that
week.
Same report. Yeah.
And what destination had the largest positive movement week over week in this past week in all of the world?
I can't even imagine.
Myrtle Beach, South Carolina.
And do you know why? Because we have a really forward-thinking CVB, and we have a lot of forward-thinking properties that have been spending money on advertising.
Like they've been moving
throughout
and
this
pushing.
thing.
Yep.
But
I'm clearly not
selling
their
staying
target
top of
audience.
mind. Yeah, advertising works, guys. You should never stop advertising.
And the number difference is substantial. Actually, from all the movers who were positive this week, Myrtle Beach was the only one who was also positive last week.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone was positive the week before because April 12th looks like very few were positive. But yes, it's the mentality of the Myrtle Beach travel industry has been very much one of, we're going to continue forging forward. We're going to continue doing what we can to stay top of mind to our consumers. And now you look at the results. It's crazy. I mean, it's really crazy, the difference.
It's almost like marketing actually works. I mean,
I know.
That's crazy talk now. No.
You know, it's really interesting because I keep getting this question from our clients: where should we ramp up our spending on revenue management? And I'm like, well, what are you doing in marketing? Because revenue management, I mean, is great, and I think you should spend money on it. Absolutely, don't cut out revenue management. But right now, all your focus should be on marketing, because you've got to get that future traveler, and revenue managers tend to deal with the more immediate traveler. If your pricing is set, there's not a lot of fluctuations. You need to be focused on how are you capturing the interest of your guest, not is your bar $20 above or below a certain point.
But it's counterintuitive in a crisis. Everybody wants to. We have to scale back. Everything is about protecting jobs, scaling money back, protecting the business. Yet in actually spending money, you are.
Well, it's very much like saying, you know what, having a guest in my building costs me utilities, it costs me cleaning fees. I need to reduce expenses, so I'm not going to accept any more guests. That's what you're doing when you cut marketing, sales.
That is
revenue.
Fantastic.
So
I am totally going to rip that off.
I coined a phrase for my clients when I was talking about why I kept updating. I think I was wanting to Ed about this the other day on one of our afternoon calls about how I had to keep changing the marketing budgeting plan forward, how I was keep fragmenting it as to segmentations and so forth. Well, now I'm calling it emergence budgeting. What's your emergence budget? What are you doing about it's not about your annual budget, it's not about your marketing budget, it's what about your emergence budget? What are you planning for to spend in your first step, second step, third step, fourth step out of this process? And that doesn't necessarily mean waiting for the starting gun to fire. It means, what are you doing about spending as you emerge? Like, you're already spending money towards things, not waiting for the gun to fire. Interesting little note out of a conversation with somebody off of Amadeus the other day. There was a conversation that Airbnb was not going to be allowing for bookings, or there was some advertising restriction they were placing upon themselves. I didn't know if anybody else had heard something about that. They were going to be capping what they were doing for 4-week latency. I didn't know if that was anything that anybody else had picked up on.
So are they just following what Expedia said then?
Sounds like it. It sounds like it.
Because Expedia, what is it?
Yeah, Booking.com and Expedia both said they're going to do a 4-6 week latency on it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, is that really a big deal?
Well, it does continue to think that, I mean, everybody's going to run to go over, and the prices are going to, for everything, you're going to get jacked up as soon as anybody sees any glimmer that they should be spending money. Everybody and their brother's going to throw it at it. The rates are going to go up for everything, but having less people jump at that, not a bad thing.
No, and it also means hopefully your first wave of bump is primarily direct business, which means it's more profitable. So that's
and it's cheaper to reach those people because there won't be competition on ads as well.
Mm-hmm. So right now you can just put up wins in every column.
Yeah. There's been some interesting cottage businesses coming out. I always track the RV stuff because of Elise and those RV parks that she has. There's a new thing now for RVers where instead of going to RV parks, people that have land acreage are offering, there's a new platform that you can actually park your RV on people's private land connected.
Yes, we all know the person who's running that platform. It's someone from our industry.
Who?
Alan Young.
Alan's
That's
doing
his
it?
Startup, yeah.
Good for Alan, man.
Right.
Yeah, and it's been really big for them. Like,
it's
a really exciting.
And I'm like, this is
it
really
makes
cool.
a lot of sense because actually there's also a big problem right now for full-time RVers, which I happen to know something about because my parents are full-time RVers. So they don't have a house that they can go back to when they kick you out of the park because of closures. Like,
but Walmart will always allow you to be there.
Yes, and will they also allow you to hook up to sewer and electric?
Nope.
Exactly. So how long could you live in your house without sewer or electric? Just a quick question.
Well, I mean, because of our hurricane knowledge, I can tell you that.
Yes, you know exactly how long, but it's a finite amount of time.
Yes, it is.
So
It's a countdown
I think
timer
that
for
it's really smart, and it's easy right now, especially in the RV industry, because how many RV parks are really run professionally the way that hotels are? A lot of them are already mom and pop operations. So I think if anybody's looking for an investment area, RV parks, I feel like turning those around and making them professional, it's the way to go right now.
Oh yeah, because that talk about people that are going to be jumping as soon as they even get a hint that they can let go. Low gas prices, don't fly, get to go where you want to.
Not a lot of traffic.
Not a lot of traffic. Oh yeah.
Life's good for RVs. But yes, that company you're talking about, Alan, or Lauren, that's Alan Young's business.
That's awesome. I'll have to go over and say hi to him and congratulate him. I didn't realize he was connected to that at all. But I came across him like, that is a brilliant grow-up business from this. Chance to go over and get people to still go over and play in stage spaces. So out of the list that Robert did throw us that we didn't have the chance to actually go through.
Before we do that, I'm going to run.
So, Mr. Ed?
Yeah, actually, I was.
I'll wrap up on the one because I want to get his poop in. I want to show respect to Robert, even though he's not with us, that I do go over and take his content and we'll put it on the show.
We did. In his list was the fuel.
Right.
Okay, you know what? You're absolutely right. We did. We did put the okay. You're right. We did.
We spent
Robert,
an entire show on one of Robert's ideas.
Okay. So yeah, Robert. When you play, Mr. Ed, if people want to know about you, what Flip2 does, where can they find you, sir?
You can go to flip.to, and you can find me on social media, Edward StOnge. And thank you very much, everyone.
Valyn, if they want to know more about you and what you do.
Sure, nor1.com, and I'm Valyn Perini, pretty much everywhere.
Melissa, I hope you don't take this as you never come back to the show. And if you ever want to just tell Stuart, don't worry, I got this, you're more than welcome.
Thank you.
To pop back anytime you would like to.
I'm not easily scared. I'm still at fuel, so.
That's true. Yeah, good point. You do got some tough, So, resilient. Stuart. Stuart, I'm not even going to ask you. Sorry, dude, you're out of this. All right. So, Melissa, if people would like to know more about you and about what Fuel Travel does and your amazing award-winning podcast, where can they find you?
You can find us at fueltravel.com.
And the podcast?
Is at fueltravel.com/podcast.
Excellent. And Mr. Chop Liver? Stuart?
Oh, I thought you were talking to Tristen. Like, wow.
Jeez. I was going to say that. The fish and bread thing, you know.
You've been initiated now. Yeah, what she said. Fueltravel.com/podcast.
Excellent. Lily, where people can find you and what TCRM Services and Things Up Enterprises does, and your podcast as well, your amazing podcast.
You can find us at tcrmservices.com. You can find us at thinkupenterprises.com, where you can click right through to the podcast, which is featured on the homepage. And by the way, we do have a new podcast episode coming out early next week on sales, marketing, and revenue post-coronavirus and how those should integrate. Just a little plug there. But yeah, and of course, you can always find us on LinkedIn.
And Tristen, do I still have to use the PEG word?
No, officially
he's officially a consultant now.
I'm officially a consultant.
So, Chris, if people want to find you or what you do, sir, where is it they can find you?
They can find me on LinkedIn under Tristen Heaword. Alternatively, you can find me at trist.heaword@3and6.agency, which will be a new venture that Ben and I are going to be working on. More to follow on that in the coming weeks and months.
Not to be confused with the 3-6 Mafia, which was an American hip hop group from Memphis.
We've already had that one mentioned.
It's a little different.
Yeah. Slightly different. We've got a different vibe going. You know,
you're definitely more hip. Yeah.
Less guitar.
Yeah, we're a little bit older. It's more like hip operation than. That was really bad. Sorry, the dad jokes are coming out now.
It's the hip hop,
that's so bad.
not the hip hop.
Yeah, that's good stuff. And just very quickly, if you would like to find this or any other previous 247 shows that we have had, you can find us at hospitalitydigitalmarketing.com/live. Look for show number 248. Show notes and links will be there, plus the replayer as well. And also the podcast Hospitality Marketing you can find on 36 different platforms, including Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistant. With that in mind, thank you, everyone, and appreciate everyone's time. And we'll see everyone at 11:30 Eastern next week, Friday.
Bye, everyone. Have a great week.
Bye, guys. Thank you.